Hello everybody, it's Sarah, and today I have part 2 of a video that, well, if you recognize the outfit, I filmed that video 5 minutes ago, but depending on when I'll upload this video, you either got it a few days ago or a few weeks ago. Part 1 it is. It depends on how much time I have to film in between. But today I have for you a bookish anti-haul. I want to talk to you today about the authors that I have no interest in buying the books from, and most of the time also no interest in reading the books from. And so if that isn't your thing, if you don't like negativity, you're welcome to click off and just watch part 1 of this video, which was the authors I definitely want to read more from. That video will be linked down below and up there, so you're welcome to do that if you don't like negativity. But yeah, basically I have 3 categories in this video. First, I have authors where I read 1 or more books from and I just have no interest in reading any more of their books because I didn't like their writing or whatever. Second, I have a ton of authors who I just don't like the authors, like personality wise, I don't like the authors, or they did something that, you know, I don't want to support, and so I have no interest in reading their books. And third, I have 2 authors where I might read the book still in the future, but I certainly have no interest anymore in buying their books. But let's start with the least negative. Let's start with the authors where I have no more interest in reading their books simply because their books weren't for me. First, I have Leigh Bardugo, the Grishaverse. I have read the first Grisha trilogy and I have read Six of Crows. And to be honest, first of all, I'm no longer a YA reader. I know she has an adult series now out as well, but I'm no longer a YA reader, so I have no interest in continuing on with the Grisha series. I also wasn't all that invested in any of the characters. I'm still probably gonna continue on with the show, so that's a different thing. But I just really have no interest in continuing on with the Grishaverse. I have no interest in continuing on with any of Leigh Bardugo's other YA stuff because I just wasn't the biggest fan of her writing. And I also have no interest in reading her adult series. Like, I don't know why, it just didn't pique my interest. It's as simple as that. Next, I have a book where I'm rather sad because, like, their books really interest me whenever I see them, but then I remember this book and I'm like, actually, there's so many other books that interest me more, so I'm probably never gonna pick up another book by this author again. Which, by the way, with these first 2 authors, obviously, if in the future there's this one book that I'm just really interested for some reason, I'm gonna change my mind. So with these first 2, it's pretty simple. But the second author I'm talking about is Natalie Haynes. Natalie Haynes mostly writes Greek myth retellings, feminist Greek myth retellings. I have read 1,000 Ships by her, which centers the women of Troy, or, well, not just the women of Troy, but generally the women that play a role in the Odyssey as well as in the Iliad. And so, yeah, I did enjoy this. I think I actually gave it 3 stars. But the main thing that I remember from this is that there was just an awful lot of girl hate, especially when it came to Helen. And I just was not vibing with that. And so whenever I see one of her books, which I think currently she has, or sometime soon, she has a retelling of Medusa out, or the story of Medusa, which sounds interesting, but then I'm also like, I just, you know, there were some issues that I had with this book, so I don't know, I'm just currently not really interested in picking up any of her other books. So next I want to talk about the authors that either have done the problematic thing TM, or that I just don't vibe with on a personal level. And first of all, I have done a whole video talking about reading problematic authors. I will leave that link down below and up there. It's been a while though, so I'm not 100% sure if I completely agree with everything I said still in that video, because I change. But basically, me talking about these authors and me not wanting to read them anymore is not supposed to be a judgment of you. I mean, depending on the author, if you still read J.K. Rowling, and if you can't let go of J.K. Rowling and Harry Potter, or have found a way where you can enjoy Harry Potter without supporting J.K. Rowling, I might judge you a little bit. But generally speaking, I'm not that much of a judgmental person. You can read whatever you want. It's fine. However, I am someone, especially when it comes to authors that I have never read books from, even if they do a bit of a problematic thing, or if I start not vibing with them, if I get like wrong vibes from them, I am very quick in crossing off authors off of my TBR, because frankly speaking, and I have mentioned that a few times already in videos, my TBR is huge. If I cross an author off of my TBR, even for a minor thing, it's a good thing, you know, because there's so many books out there that I really want to read that I don't really feel the need to, you know, support an author, even if they maybe apologize. Like, it could be that I'm talking about some things now and some of these authors have apologized for the thing they did, but to be honest, I don't care. I don't like keep track of that. I don't even keep track on if an author I read does something problematic or not. These are all just things I'm going to talk about that just came across my Twitter feed, and so I happened to notice them. But yeah, anyway, the first author I have actually is an author where I have read a book from them previously, and where it kind of makes me sad that I don't really want to read any more books from them, because I do think this was one of my favorite books of 2021, and the author is Jeanette Winterson. The book I read was Wait, and just as I finished this book, Jeanette Winterson had to come out and publish an article, I believe, talking about how offensive the cover changes on some of her books are, because they're now so similar to women's fiction, and like that was kind of the tone of voice that she used in writing, because obviously her books aren't women's fiction, they're literary fiction or whatever. And yeah, I just don't like women and female authors putting down an entire genre, no matter if you personally enjoy it or not. That is a genre that historically has been there to give women voices. And you know, genres that are written a lot by women and read a lot by women already struggle with not being taken seriously and, you know, being made fun of, whatever. Just look at the romance genre and how people talk about romance. And so yeah, that just really rubbed me the wrong way, that article. And so I decided, you know what, I don't need to read anything more from this author. Next, I have a series from an author that I've also already previously read, and that is The Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. Basically, like, I'm not against reading Jim Butcher. I have read his YA high fantasy series, the Codex Alera, and did really enjoy it, but I just have no interest whatsoever in reading The Dresden Files, and the main reason for that is that I have heard that the series struggles a lot at the beginning with misogyny, and you know, I have heard that it gets better and that it gets really great towards the end and whatever, but I just don't feel the need to, you know, make my way through misogynistic books just to get to books that are better and that don't do that anymore. Again, I have so much to read. I really don't need another I don't know how many book series on my TBR. Continuing on, I have another author, once again, not a series, and that is Raymond E. Feist. I have read the first book in his Serpent War series, which is set in the same world as the Rift War sagas. And yeah, the reason why I also don't want to read anything more by him is because that book was a misogynistic dumpster fire. The only female characters were basically whores and prostitutes, and then one like virgin-like childhood friend that got raped at the very beginning of the book, which was the inciting incident, by the way, because our main character killed the rapist, and so he was sent off to war as his prison sentence or whatever. And then towards the end of the book, he just, you know, he just had sex with a prostitute for the first time, which, by the way, sex work is fine. I don't know why that just came out so judgmental. But anyway, he had sex for the first time, and so he's lying in his, I don't know, sleeping tent, whatever, and he remembers the scene when his best friend was raped. And instead of him once again being disgusted or whatever, he remembers, you know, how supple her breasts looked under the ripped open corset or whatever she wore, and how beautiful the contrast between the blood and the white of her thighs was, and he checks off to that memory. So, you know, I don't care that that series was written like 30-40 years ago. If a man writes something like that at one point, I'm not interested in reading any more than that. And the only exception that I had to that rule was the one that I also mentioned in my authors I want to read more from series. That was the Empire trilogy, which he wrote in cooperation with Jenny Wirtz. And to be honest, the way the female characters are written in that other series, I'm pretty sure Raymond E. Feist didn't have a lot to do with that series, aside from it being set in his world and him maybe editing it a bit. But yeah, anyway, continuing on. Next, I have Mark Lawrence, who at some point once said that women don't have a place as writers in adult high fantasy. And you know what? I don't need that. I don't even care if he still has that opinion or not. Once again, I have so many books on my TBR. I don't need to, you know, sit here waiting if he took back that statement or not. So yeah, not interested in reading anything by Mark Lawrence. And then also similarly Scott Lynch, although Scott Lynch is a bit worse because it has come out that he is pretty abusive towards authors whom he takes as his protege. Like, there was a whole thing a few years ago, like 1.5 years ago, 1 year ago, I don't remember exactly, where a lot of info came out about how a lot of male fantasy authors treat women at fantasy conventions and so on, and also in their private life. And yeah, Scott Lynch was one of those, and so yeah, not interested in reading any more of his books. Also helps that I did read the first Locke Lamora book, The Lies of Locke Lamora, and I just, you know, it was fine, so it was whatever. And then the last author actually is a very recent addition, and that is, if you have been on Twitter at one point in the past few weeks, you might have seen a whole thing go down around the book called Silkfire that apparently, even on a technical and writing level, is absolute trash and just really bad. I can't say if it is or not, I haven't read it, but I just really didn't like how the author Saba Eller just reacted to the whole situation. I mean, even before that, whenever he said something on Twitter or anything about his book, I just really didn't like how he phrased things. Like, I don't know, whenever he said something about the book, it just always seemed very, very arrogant the way he would phrase things. And just, you know, it's high fantasy, and because of that it might be so hard to understand and so difficult to understand and get into it. And if you don't like my book, it's just because you're not used to reading fantasy. And I'm just like, I'm sorry, I don't need the type of elitist attitude. So, you know what? Not gonna read your books. I'm just not gonna read your books. And lastly, I have the 2 books by authors where I'm still somewhat interested in reading their books. Well, one of them I will definitely still read her books. The other one, I'm still kind of somewhat interested in reading their books, but I don't want to buy their books anymore because I don't want to monetarily support them anymore. First, I have Jay Kristoff with Nevernight. You know, with Jay Kristoff, there's just too many things around him where I don't want to read his books anymore. I mean, this series, you know, when I read it, it really was something that I highly enjoyed, but I think now, knowing more about the author, it's just very edgelord. And so because of that, first of all, I'm not sure I would even still want to read his books for an enjoyment level rather than just, you know, making fun of them mostly. So yeah, if I ever read his book still, that would be the reason. But yeah, there's just a few things that came out about him, not necessarily about him, but the way he reacts to criticism of his books is just not my vibe. And because of that, you know, I don't necessarily want to support him anymore, and probably just won't read him anymore in general. And lastly, well, we have the biggest one, and that is an author that I actually used to call one of my authors, and that is Brandon Sanderson. And yeah, I still enjoy his stories. I still want to finish his series. I still want to finish his stories, but I don't want to monetarily support him anymore. I have actually been struggling with whether or not to buy his books ever since I found out that he is Mormon, because I did know that a lot of Mormons are expected to tithe to the church. And that church obviously then spends that money on, you know, doing what a church does best and being homophobic as fuck. And just, you know, I have my issues with organized religion, let's put it like that. And so I have been struggling for a while now, and most of the time I just said to myself, you know, Brandon Sanderson has queer characters in his later books somewhat. He spoke out in interviews about how characters in his books are queer. I know that he has a kind of queer-phobic, homophobic past, but you know, everything now, the way he talks about queer people, he accepts our existence, and so I'm fine with buying his books. Also, his books are really important to me, and also he has like millions of supporters anyway, so what difference does it make if I buy the book or not? And so that was kind of the thoughts that I had mostly. Also, the sun vanished slowly over the past few minutes. I don't know if you noticed, but yeah, that was my thoughts over the past few years. And then obviously last year I did my reread of the Cosmere series, and I just don't enjoy it as much anymore, so I'm not as attached to the series anymore. And then also with the whole Kickstarter, I just, you know, I just kind of did the what's it called, not the accounting, but the maths on like how much of the Kickstarter might be his income and how much of that would go to tithing the Mormon church. And I was just like, you know what, I just don't want to support him monetarily anymore. And I know there's a lot of people who are like, yeah, but you know, he's supportive of queer people. And I'm just like, yeah, but is he though? Is he though? Because he teaches at BYU, and thanks to Spence from Things Reads, who's a good friend, I have learned quite a few things about BYU and Mormonism and so on. Spence grew up Mormon, so yeah, I'm just like, you know, how supportive of queer rights are you really if you teach at a university that blatantly is anti-queer? And so yeah, I might still read his books. I will probably still read his books because I'm a fucking completionist, but I just don't want to buy his books anymore. And Brandon Sanderson is a big enough author that I can easily get his books secondhand. So, you know what? Or at the library, obviously. You know what, I'm just not gonna buy his books anymore. And yeah, that was it for this video. If I have mentioned any books that like really upset you that I won't read them anymore, leave those books in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, I have hiccups. It's gonna be a hard thing getting through this outro. If you enjoyed this video, maybe think about giving me a thumbs up and also maybe subscribing. All the links to my social media as well as to my book club of Queens, Witches and Valkyries, where I read one adult high fantasy book written by a woman or genderqueer person per month, will be left linked down below, so go and check those out, and I hope I'll see you soon. Bye!